Some of the most chilling horror stories are those that hit closest to home. They don't feature ghosts or monsters, but something far more terrifying, a trespasser. In this video, we're going beyond urban legends to explore 5 true disturbing stories of home invasions and break-ins that prove the scariest monsters are often human. From a family massacre in a quiet California cabin in 1981 to a serial killer who left a trail of terror across 2 states, these are the real-life horror stories that will make you double-check your lucks tonight. 1. The Ketty Cabin Murders. The serene, rustic setting of the Ketty Resort in California's Sierra Nevada mountains in 1981 seemed an unlikely backdrop for a horrific crime. But on April 12, 1981, a brutal and baffling quadruple murder shattered the peace of the small community and created one of America's most enduring cold cases. The victims were Glenna Sharp, a 36-year-old mother of 5, her 15-year-old son, John, and his 17-year-old friend, Dana Wingate. The crime was discovered by Glenna's 14-year-old daughter, Sheila, who had spent the night in a neighboring cabin. When she returned home, she found a scene of unimaginable horror. Glenna, John, and Dana were all dead, bound with electrical wire and medical tape, and their bodies were found in the living room. The details of the crime scene were particularly disturbing. The victims had been brutally attacked with multiple weapons, including a hammer and several knives. The violence was so extreme that it suggested a personal, frenzied attack. Yet, in a bizarre and chilling twist, Glenna's 2 younger sons, ages 10 and 11, and their friend, a 12-year-old boy, were found in a back bedroom, unharmed and seemingly asleep during the entire ordeal. Most perplexing of all was the disappearance of Glenna's 12-year-old daughter, Tina. Her bed was empty, and there was no sign of a struggle in her room. For years, her disappearance haunted the family and investigators. It wasn't until 1984 that a fragment of her skull was discovered in the nearby Feather River Canyon, confirming her death but offering no clues to her killer. The investigation into the Ketty murders was plagued by missteps and a lack of clear leads from the beginning. There were reports of a struggle, including a bloody handprint on a fence, but the leads went cold. The crime was so strange, a brutal triple murder with 3 young witnesses left unharmed and a missing 4th victim, that it fueled a variety of theories, from a home invasion gone wrong to a targeted revenge killing. Suspects were considered, including a neighbor with a history of violence and a man who had confessed to a prison cellmate, but no arrests were ever made. The Ketty murders remain a chilling reminder of a random act of evil that trespassed into a family's life and left a void that has never been filled. 2. The Cheshire, Connecticut home invasion. In 2007, the Petit family of Cheshire, Connecticut seemed to have the perfect life. Dr. William Petit was a respected endocrinologist. His wife Jennifer was a devoted mother and nurse, and they had 2 beautiful daughters, Michaela, 11, and Haley, 17. Their idyllic existence was shattered in the early hours of July 23 when 2 paroled felons, Stephen Hayes and Joshua Komisarjevsky, broke into their home. The 2 men had originally planned to burgle the house, believing it was an easy target. However, once inside, they decided to escalate their crimes to a home invasion. The family's ordeal lasted for hours. The 2 men tied up Dr. Petit in the basement, where they brutally beat him. They then held his wife and daughters captive upstairs. The horrifying events that followed were a testament to the criminals' depravity. The men drove Jennifer to a local bank to withdraw money, threatening her and her children's lives if she didn't comply. All the while, Dr. Petit
severely injured and tied up in the basement, managed to free himself. He crawled to a neighbor's house and raised the alarm. When police arrived, the house was already engulfed in flames. Hayes and Komisarjevsky had doused the home in gasoline and set it on fire, leaving the women and girls inside. Dr. Petit's wife and 2 daughters died from smoke inhalation. The tragedy was so shocking and senseless that it sparked national outrage and a renewed debate about the justice system's handling of paroled criminals. Both men were captured trying to flee the burning house and were later tried and convicted. The trial was a grueling process for the surviving Dr. Petit and the victim's extended family. The 2 men were found guilty of murder and other charges and were sentenced to death. This horrifying case is a stark reminder of how a seemingly random act of trespassing can spiral into unimaginable evil, forever altering the lives of an innocent family.
3. The Richard Speck Murders. The night of July 13, 1966, forever changed the face of nursing in America and left a mark on the nation's psyche. Richard Speck, a drifter with a history of minor crimes, broke into a townhouse on Chicago's South Side that was being used as a dormitory for 8 student nurses from South Chicago Community Hospital. Speck, armed with a knife, held the women hostage for hours. He systematically took each of the 8 women, one by one, to separate rooms where he brutally tortured and murdered them. The victims were all between the ages of 20 and 23. His methods were so savage that they horrified even seasoned detectives. What makes this story a true trespassing horror is the sheer terror of what transpired inside that house. 8 women, trapped and helpless, were subjected to an unimaginable ordeal. But one of the women, a Filipino nurse named Corazon Amurao, managed to survive. In a moment of sheer terror and quick thinking, she hid under a bed while Speck was occupied with his other victims. She remained hidden for hours, a silent witness to the carnage, until she was certain he had left. Corazon's survival was a miracle, and her courage was the key to Speck's capture. She was able to provide a detailed description of the killer, leading to a massive manhunt. Just days later, Speck was found in a Skid Row flophouse after attempting suicide. Corazon Amurao positively identified him, and he was quickly convicted. The Richard Speck murders were a watershed moment in American crime. The case highlighted the vulnerability of women and the terrifying reality of a random, unprovoked attack. The image of the 9 women, all in the prime of their lives, held captive and murdered by a lone intruder, became a powerful and enduring symbol of fear. 4. The Night Stalker. In the summer of 1985, a wave of terror swept across California. A serial killer, later dubbed the Night Stalker, was breaking into homes in the dead of night, killing, raping, and assaulting his victims. The man behind the mask of fear was Richard Ramirez, a drifter with a disturbed past who believed he was an instrument of Satan. Ramirez's reign of terror was particularly terrifying because his victims were seemingly random. He didn't discriminate by age, race, or gender. He targeted people in their homes, in suburban neighborhoods, and he used a variety of weapons, including guns, knives, and blunt instruments. He often left behind satanic symbols at the crime scenes, adding to the psychological horror of his crimes. His modus operandi was simple. He would find unlocked doors or windows, or he would simply climb in. Once inside, he would terrorize the residents. The randomness of his attacks meant that no one felt safe, and the fear became so widespread that people in Los Angeles and San Francisco began to sleep with loaded weapons and take extreme security measures.
The police were under immense pressure, and a massive manhunt was launched. The break in the case came from a teenage witness who had seen Ramirez's car. Police were able to trace the vehicle, and with a new composite sketch, they identified him. But the real capture of Ramirez was a shocking display of public outrage and courage. When his photo was released to the media, a group of citizens in East Los Angeles recognized him and physically subdued him until police arrived. Ramirez was convicted of 13 murders and other charges. Throughout his trial and time in prison, he remained unrepentant, even shouting, "Hail Satan," during his arraignment. The Night Stalker's story is a terrifying reminder of how a lone individual, driven by a twisted ideology, can trespass into people's lives and create a pervasive sense of fear that can haunt a community for years.
5. The Chauffeur de la Drôme. In the early 20th century, a horrifying gang of criminals terrorized the Drôme region of rural France. Their reign of terror, which lasted from 1906 to 1908, was a series of brutal home invasions and murders that became a part of French folklore. The gang, known as the Chauffeurs de la Drôme, or the Foot Warmers of Drôme, earned their gruesome nickname from their signature method of torture. The gang, composed of 4 men, would break into the homes of farmers and other wealthy, isolated residents. They were not simply after money. Their crimes were an exercise in extreme cruelty. Their most infamous torture method involved tying their victims down and holding their bare feet to a fire or a stove until they revealed the location of their valuables. The victims were often elderly or isolated, making them easy targets for the ruthless gang. The chauffeurs were responsible for at least 18 murders and numerous assaults. The rural population lived in a constant state of fear as the gang seemed to strike with impunity. The authorities were at a loss as the gang operated in a large, isolated area and left few clues. The manhunt was a slow and painstaking process, but eventually the gang was identified and captured. Their trial was a national sensation, as the public was horrified by the details of their crimes. The men who had shown no remorse were all found guilty and sentenced to death. The story of the Chauffeur de la Drôme is a chilling historical account of a time when the isolation of rural life could be a deadly weakness. It's a reminder that not all trespassing is a simple matter of theft. Sometimes it is a precursor to a more sinister and violent intent. Their story remains a dark chapter in French criminal history, a terrifying example of a gang that trespassed not just into homes, but into the very souls of their victims. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into some of history's most chilling home invasion cases. If you're interested in more stories that blur the line between true crime and horror, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to help others uncover the dark truths of these real-life horrors.